Thank you for coming to the talk sponsored by Center for Korean Studies. My name is Nojin Kwak. I'm a director of the Center for Korean Studies. We have a Professor Shin Kim as a speaker for this afternoon. Professor Kim is in School of Communication at Hallym University in South Korea. And also he's a director of the Institute for Communication Arts and Technology at Hallym University as well. And Professor Kim is one of the early scholars who were interested in mobile communication in the States. He received a degree at Indiana University in 1997, and his research involved new technologies, Korean wave, and also various topics concerning media industries. He has a very busy schedule in terms of traveling around the globe. He was Korean Studies Chair from 2008 to 2009 at the Sciences Po in Paris, which is an elite institution specializing in political science in France. And also he will be a visiting professor at City University Hong Kong next year. And he's currently at the Iowa State University as a visiting scholar. So the title of the talk today is Social and Cultural Capital in the Development of Media Industry in Korea. Please join me welcoming Professor Kim.
It's very nice to see you all here at the prestigious Midwest University of Michigan. This is my second visit to Ann Arbor first visit to Ann Arbor in 15 years. I was still a graduate student at the University of Chicago, 15 years ago when I first came visit here and then drank a lot of liquors overnight because my memory of the city is so vacant, except that a lot of drinking. But I also studied at the Bloomington, Indiana, which is providing quite similar sort of social atmosphere to that of Ann Arbor. So as soon as I entered the town today, it easily reminded me of my old days, school days. Thank you very much for inviting me to this opportunity. To Professor Kwak Nojin and then Scott Gamble here and the Center for Korean Studies at U of M. The topic that I'm going to speak today is about the development of Korean communication and media industry from the perspective of social and cultural capital accumulation. But my experience of delivering lectures at this kind of occasions teaching me that this is a rather risky sort of project because the audience level of knowledge appreciating the Korean issues are so various. Some people are Korean, some people are purely non-Korean. So I just don't know, where I should set my level of talk. So, I hope you will help me, guiding me to be dancing on a right level. So, please feel free to jump on giving me questions and comments whenever you feel like. The lecture is about the basic survey of communication and media development in Korea in the last couple of decades. I will focus more on the long-term causes on the development rather than the short-term impacts. I also am trying, actually this is please don't expect me to speak a very well-devised research paper today. I'm not going to read any research paper today. This is more like my fractured research idea, coming from here and there, and then I'm trying to figure out a short monograph out of this sort of observation. So, and hopefully I can entertain you, with some useful information. So, and I try to conceptualize the development of media industry in the last couple of decades in Korea, with two distinctive phenomena, which I call one globality and the other one is mobility. Many of you are familiar, I guess, would be familiar with the Korean media situation, but Korea is fully, in a way, developed in terms of the media outlets available, from the traditional medias like newspaper and broadcasting stations to the most developed, technologically speaking, most developed media outlets on the internet and mobile communication platforms. And it's also sharing some of the major issues, which is also prevalent in other major industrialized countries. For example, the media convergence issue, all these kind of different media is converging on a uniform digital platform today, and then which is creating another another type of convergence on different levels, on like a legal and political level, for example. Previously, for example, broadcasting industry and say telecommunication industry were not considered to be in the same market, but they are today. And then likewise, the industry is pushing the government to change its policy and regulations. And the problem is coming from a huge a gap, discrepancies between the fast changing reality and then lagging a social system, which cannot properly explain and then appropriate the recent development. For example, the Korean society has long enjoyed a public broadcasting system starting from early 1980s, which was awkwardly created by the then military autocratic regime, not for the purpose of creating a pure public good, but for the purpose of controlling the media outlet of the nation, right after the illegal military coup. But then, in any case, the public broadcasting system has been maintained for the last 3 decades, and has actually grown to a very dominant market forces in the media system, and which is giving the nation a lot of delicate and complicated problems, because as a public system, it is supposed to be creating a very nice, good result, as opposed to the private system. But then, since it is the market dominant in a pretty much monopolized market system, it is in itself creating anti-market inefficiencies. And then, as I just skipped, now the entire media market of Korean society is fully blooming, and then it is much larger than having a couple of public broadcasting system, so that we cannot stay in accordance with the publicly oriented broadcasting system. Then the country need to expand and to move on to a more like a commercialized and industrialized and privatized media system in general. But then there is this gap again, as I said, between the reality, which is changing fast, and then the legal system that have been stayed there for the last few decades. So in any case, we do have this kind of problem, and market failure is happening, and a lot of new media industry is experiencing some kind of awkward government regulation, and then a very aggressive competition against that, as I said, competition against the public broadcasting system, such as KBS or NBC or SBS even. For any case, I don't have much time to stay on this issue further, but maybe if you're interested in knowing further on this issue, we may use a little bit of time after the lecture today. New medias like cable TVs, DMBs, IPTVs, all these kind of, or internet-based media are blossoming. And just we'll go through a few slides to give you some more idea on the burgeoning media market, shows that the online market is increasing quite rapidly now. As the orange bar is, showing the global market, the size of global market, and then the maroon color is showing that the domestic market in Korea. Broadcast market is also growing and growing. IPTV has been. Are you familiar with this notion of IPTV? IPTV is, you know what cable TV is, right? You're receiving your signal through your local cable operators, such as Comcast. But IPTV is not much different. By IPTV, we are saying a different sort of technological platform through which you receive your TV signals. IPTV means Internet Protocol Television, and then you receive your signal. In the case of cable television, you receive your signal through coaxial cable line connected to each of your apartment or individual house. But in the case of IPTV, you receive your TV signal through your internet connection, okay? And then the most common strength of IPTV in terms of its technological advantage is that it has a huge capacity for interactivity, interactive choice. As viewers, you can choose different, the digital cable TV is already operating, offering a similar kind of services now, but the IPTV has a wider and then better prospect. And countries all over the world is moving fast toward the IPTV platform. So by platform, I mean not the contents, but the way, the technological method of the contents are being, delivered. And IPTV started just a couple of years ago in Korea, and then it is now taking the cable TV subscribers fast, which is about the same situation in, let me just, like in the US. In the US, the IPTV subscription is increasing quite fast, just like in Korea and all other countries, Hong Kong, Singapore, France, Germany, everywhere. So and then accordingly, the cable TV subscription is losing its share of market, to the new IPTV. Well, let me just. Online advertising market is growing, which is a reflection of that how the internet-based online media is growing fast and fast. Okay, let me just skip. And this is this is one of the many available sort of data graph, which I particularly like because it has Korea on top of it. So what we call a digital opportunity index, composed by the International Telecommunication Union annually. And then a couple of years ago, Korea was, and still I think, is considered to be a top country in the world in terms of DOI, Digital Opportunity Index, which is a sort of a composite of indices, in combining different kind of indexes. It says that 11 different ICT indicators, combining them all together, the hardware availability, accessibility, the usability, and the content, wise. So it's sort of denotating the infrastructure and then other aspects, how the society in general is fully developed into the sort of a digital opportunity. And let's see where the location of the United States is. Where is it? Okay, in the 20th, which is actually not bad. When I was using this slide in France, I was quite, somewhat embarrassing to my students in the classroom because France doesn't appear. in top 25, you know. Well, in any case, what I'm saying is that Korea, as many of you are aware, is really fully blossoming in traditional and then new media scene, in industry-wise, in contents-wise, in you know, consuming-wise, in almost every aspect. And this development of Korean media has created two distinctive, you know, observable phenomena, which I mentioned at the beginning, which I think is that one is a globality. Now the Korean media is going global, which never happened. You know, American media went global for the last 50 years or even longer. If you count on the American Hollywood movies, it has been global from the very beginning. So it has been a century-long phenomena. And many Americans don't even appreciate how their own media has been global and globally affecting on other cultures and then lives of people, you know. But then Americans themselves are not that much global. The situation of American media itself is quite, you know, almost, I may say, parochial, you know. If you go to the general cinema of any town's, you know, film showing places, it's very difficult to find any foreign movie. But on college campuses, you find a lot of, you know, foreign movies. Then, in any case, for Koreans, this was a quite new sort of trend, which never was experienced by some people. The increasing transnational consumption of pop culture within Asia, you know, especially the Korean-made pop cultural products have been pretty well received in the adjacent countries like China, Japan, Hong Kong, Taiwan, the Philippines, and other Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia. And then now it's going over to some of these Middle Eastern countries and then even to some of these European countries. And which is also pretty well received by the Korean sort of diasporic communities in the U.S., in LA, in New York, New Jersey, Chicago, you know, Atlanta. You'll, you know, easily find pretty big audience. The Korean wave in Asian societies are defined by the popularity of dramas, TV dramas, and movies. Many of you might recognize who she is. How many of you do know who she is? Okay, great, great. I took this picture from a Taiwanese newspaper. A few years ago, I was giving a lecture at the Taiwanese university, and then in my hotel room, there was this newspaper, you know. So I thought it's really interesting because I recognize obviously who she was. She's a famous Korean actress. And this photo was taken by a Taiwanese newspaper man in the street of Beijing. This is Beijing, and it's a huge signboard. The girl is obviously trying to sell a Japanese brand digital camera Olympus, which was manufactured in China, right? And then advertised in the street of Beijing, and obviously the Taiwanese newspaper reporter thought this is an interesting phenomenon, you know. And then again, the Korean professor thought that this is really an interesting phenomenon, which is nothing. This is a mundane thing happening every day, every bit in East Asia today, you know. A very sort of secular globality. Globality is nothing grandiose, nothing you know, special, but it's happening every bit, every corner of your daily life. And I simply thought that this one small picture is interestingly showing, you know, the globality that we are experiencing today. And the girl got her sort of a global fame, or in the East Asian region, through this one movie, you know. I never watched this movie when it was actually released, and I was conducting a field research in Hong Kong in the year of 2002. And then when I went there, all the students that I interviewed, I was doing a fieldwork about the use of mobile communication in Hong Kong. And all the students who answered to my interviews asked me whether I watched this movie, which I didn't. So they watched me, as if they couldn't believe, why I didn't watch this movie. So as soon as I got back home, one of the first things that I did was actually finding a VHS tape of this movie and then watched it. Famous TV drama which hit hard the Japanese audience in the early part of 2000, Winter Sonata. This was a totally unexpected happening. Japan has a quite a wide variety of TV channels available, and then NHK is the dominant public channel, and the NHK is running two offshoot satellite channels, which is BS1, BS2. BS1, BS2 is a sort of satellite channels. Domestic ratings for these two channels are very, very low. It's less than a few percent, So these Japanese producers were searching some just interesting program which can be used as a feeder route for their morning time. And he somehow, got across with this Winter Sonata and then purchased it at a very cheap price and filled it on the morning time, just like the soap opera in the U.S. But this unexpectedly attracted a high rate. And later, based on this initial success, the NHK decided to the same drama rerun and rerun, a few more times, and moved it to the primetime main channel, which even evoked a even bigger sort of audience response. This another serial drama, 대장금 or Jewel in the Palace, in its English name, created another huge boom in Chinese, speaking societies as soon as it was released. But over the years, what I observed is that observed from the popularity of Korean-made pop products was that the diversity of popular genres, not just one or two, or just few dramas or musics creating a huge popularity, but it was not that case. According to the different societies, different type of programs received and then created unexpected popularity. So, for example, the one Winter Sonata, which was pretty well received in Korea and then other societies as well, but never created that much of fandom as was the case in Japan. Likewise, there are many other different types of things. And so what I'm saying is, depending on the societies that the dramas are arriving, the fandoms, the receptions, are quite different. And the Korean wave is also sustaining by forming loyal customers or fans and presence of top pop stars. This is a general sort of characteristics that you can find from any kind of pop fandom. You like some musician from Europe, or like any type of, I don't know. For example, I'm a fan of Sting, and there are many fans or different societies, Sting fandom, just like that. Korean pop things have been creating sort of a global fandom. And then after a decade, we began asking, why? Because we never intended to create this beforehand. It was created pretty much afterwards. And then we didn't know why this was suddenly happening. At first, many people predicted that, well, this would be just a passing wind, maybe 1 or 2 years, and then this will be sooner or later died out. But it never actually happened. And then at this point, after 20 years, I think, my personal observation is that this will go on for some while. Because, because of that, the very nature of consumption on pop products. Elvis Presley is still selling. You know that? Have you ever bought Elvis Presley music yourself? Maybe not. How about your parents? Have you ever bought any music through online or offline, Avril Lavigne? Okay. How about your parents? Were your parents buying Avril Lavigne or, someone like that? This is pretty much a generational thing. So when you are into it, when you are young, you live with it. You live it. So it goes on and on and on. So once the Korean sort of media fandom was created in East Asian societies, it's going on. It's like a Bruce Lee fan is still surviving. So this global media phenomena in East Asia is not the first time with the Korean wave. Actually, this was presented by what we call Japan pop, Japanese pop phenomena in the 80s, and which was a bit different from the Korean case because in the case of Japan, Japanese pop is more with Miyazaki Hayao's animation type or Japanese manga or Hello Kitty thing. Still many people do not even know where Hello Kitty was originated from Japan, but it was. So character industry and also Nintendo, Ninja Turtle thing, a lot of TV animations. Now flowing into the offline games like NII, NII, right? So Why NII? But we. And just like the Lexus and then Infinity strategy, the Nintendo wanted to take off this bad image captured associated with its own logo. And then they tried to create a sound, bright, positive computer games, which has nothing to do with this bad Nintendo. Well, there are backgrounds which might be utilized to explain why and how this Korean wave thing has been happening. But then well, it could be a macro reasons, macro backgrounds or micro backgrounds, internal dimension and external dimension. But just to point out briefly, first of all, the level of production achieved by Korean producers in the last few decades is in fact very high, without even knowing the level of skillfulness, by the producers themselves. Actually, they achieved to some high level of production, especially in creating TV dramas. And I think this is purely thanks to a high and almost like frantic viewership of the housewives of Korean society for the last few decades. In Korean television industry, two types of programs are most important in raising and maintaining the viewership, and which is the dominance in the market. One is television drama. The other one is the main primetime news. And then, the representative, I mean, the dominant television stations have been competing fiercely among others in the last at least 4 or 5 decades to top, in these areas. And which means they have created a lot of dramas, TV dramas. They have invested the most money, the cost of production in this genre. So that I would say Korean channels are broadcasting at least like 2 to 3 hours of TV dramas per day, in the morning time and then prime time and late night. Well, of course, if you go to the Philippines, they broadcast 6 hours per day. Out of 6 hours, 4.5 hours are filled with Korean dramas today. That was taken by telenovelas decades ago. Since the Philippines is a sort of a Hispanic culture zone, in a way, the Philippines was under the Spaniard colonialism for 300 years, followed by American occupation for the next 100 years. So, the South American, Latin American made telenovelas were the main sort of imports for the Philippines TV dramas. But then it was suddenly replaced by Korean dramas in the last few years. But in any case, the level of the production is very strong domestically. And then this was backed by the new generation of producers and then also consumers, which will be discussed again in the final part of my talk today. Externally speaking, East Asia has been really dynamic in the last couple of decades. When I was a college student in Korea, I never even dreamed any possibility of visiting China in my own life. China back then was seen as the enemy state, a deadly enemy. Just by dreaming to visit the country, you could be easily sent to the prison. Right. I was a visiting professor to Peking University last year. Less than 20 years, Something happened, something that we never even dreamed, which is just one single reflection of showing how this East Asian context, East Asian society has been evolved through a dynamic social changes. And now this huge number of Chinese people are watching and crazing, watching Korean dramas and crazy about Korean dramas. Cold War system has been collapsed, and you don't know what it actually means in your daily lives. It means that you can consume Korean dramas. It means that you can visit Korea. It means you can visit China. And the rise of East Asia in general, not only in terms of the economic development, but also in increasing its sort of global influence in politics and culture as well. And most importantly, I would say, in the last couple of decades, some of these Asian societies began recognizing the importance of its neighbors. For long, perhaps followed by the Second World War, or even before, For the entire 20th century, Asians or Asian countries have paid very little attention to their neighbors because they thought they could learn nothing from their neighbors. Instead, they were forced or they were invited to look into the West, the Western model for social development. So as we were educated according to the Western model, we were forced even to memorize the Western history. I bet perhaps I have, on average, much better, stronger knowledge on Western civilization history, than any of the American students in my age. It's sort of a development scheme, and then it's based on the development model. But then, or modernization model. Modernization as interpreted as the Western style modernization. But then, after many decades, perhaps primarily based on its own economic success, East Asian societies began watching sort of long forgotten values which have always been staying within themselves. And then they began watching, neighboring societies. There also are some micro causes like cultural proximity or cultural discount and government support and some other. Yes?
So could you clarify what you mean by the Western model versus, say, the counterfactual being the East Asian model?
Well, I would say I haven't mentioned about the East Asian model, well, which is actually another separate topic to be discussed maybe another occasion. But then what I say here, Western modernization model, is the modernization model in general. The society could achieve modernity or modern development just following the model that Western societies have adopted in the 19th century and the early 20th century. So that most Asian countries, Japan for the first time, followed by Singapore, Hong Kong, Korea, Taiwan, all jumped into this industrialization following the Western model, and then tried to create sort of Asian version of Western societies. We adopted, or perhaps Japan started it very, very long time ago with the Meiji Yushin, or Meiji Yushin in the middle of 18th century, in 1865, for instance. Even before, actually, if you are looking at the modern Japanese history under Tokugawa Bakufu, Japan already started sort of a Western-style modernization, even under shogunate, but went to the full-scale Westernization from the Meiji Yushin, in the middle of 18th century. With that, they could arm themselves as an imperial power, and then unfortunately use that power by invading neighboring countries. And then the post-colonial trauma by Japanese, created within the East Asian societies are still lingering upon us today, So by post-colonial era, I extend the time period quite long, Some people are speaking specifically post-colonial era as like, post-war era from 1945 to 1950 or 55 or something like that. But I think East Asia in general are still, in a way, in the post-colonial era. Because we do have things unresolved related to the Japanese occupation and imperialism today. And that's why, in a way, Japanese pop culture has not been that much penetrated Asian societies, because deep down, many East Asian consumers do have this uneasy feeling against Japanese pops. If you go to China, you can still see and easily feel how this uneasy feeling toward Japanese pop culture and something Japanese is still very much vivid. And there's this Japanese, very, very smart Japanese cultural theorist who was trying to explain the way how Japanese pop culture has been made as they are, with the notion of odorlessness, odor, you know what odor is, bad smell. Japanese pop cultures wanted to take that odor. What kind of odor? It's for the usual East Asian consumers. This anything which is associated with Japan is felt as an odor, bad thing. You want to stay away from that. But then, at the very same time, you have a very ambivalent mind. Ambivalent. You think Japanese is good. Japan product is good. It's most advanced in a way, especially in East Asia. It's good, it's interesting, it's funny. It's something that you would want to have. It's cute. You want to have that Hello Kitty thing. But you feel sort of guilty when you're paying for, buying Hello Kitty thing, because you feel as if you are helping Japanese, right? Same thing applies to the American empire, in a way. So Yankee go home, speaking Yankee go home, and then when you go back home, you push your kids to study English hard, So this ambivalence against Japan and the U.S. is ever present in Korea and then many other Asian countries. Okay, I'll just keep, for the interest of time, just mentioning that cultural proximity, when the Korean dramas were well received in Chinese and other societies in East Asia, many people came up with this idea, explaining the reason of popularity by using cultural proximity. Because all these cultures are Confucian and then they are Asian anyway, so they like watching Asian products anyway. Is it true? Yes, perhaps, partly. But then when, many of these Korean dramas went to the Philippines and then created a huge boom, perhaps cultural proximity thing is only explaining in part. It's much more than the cultural proximity, because obviously the Philippines, as an Asian nation, is not really sharing the sort of, I would say, Chinese civilization kind of thing. As I said, because the country was under heavy influence by the Westerners for long, from the beginning of its own history. And thanks to this popularity and the development of Korean medias, the market share of Korean-made films, both in Korea and then abroad, has been very much improved. And the number of films released, increased, domestically made, screens, tickets. In a way, film business have been doing pretty well. And most impressively, the Korean film exports from virtually nothing just about a decade ago to, that much. So it's well in demand in everywhere, Well, of course, it's not a match to the Hollywood films, but then it's an interesting sort of a trend showing how domestically made movies are topping in its domestic market against the Hollywood imports. There are very few nations, very, very few number of nations. The domestic film industry is doing better than the imports. Well, that's kind of sort of a phenomenon that I wanted to look into through the notion of globality, how the Korean media industry, went global and is going global. And the second notion that I wanted to combine was the notion of mobility. Perhaps I was too ambitious to combine these two separate topics into one lecture, but let me just be brief as much as I can. This is a photograph that I took at a civic museum in the city of Shenzhen. Shenzhen, a huge city located next to Hong Kong. I would say Shenzhen is a very unique creation which has never happened in the entire human history before. When Shenzhen was designated by the late Deng Xiaoping in 1979 as a special economic zone, It was a very small fishing village with probably 3,000 or 4,000 fishers residing. It's unknown small town. Now it has become an industrial hub of southern China with 8 million solid population. 8 million. Simply speaking, in 15 to 20 years, from virtually nothing, you built a industrial hub with 8 million people. Can you come up with any other example in that sort in the human history? I guess not. And perhaps this would never will happen again. In any case, similar thing has been happened in the last maybe 200, 300 years everywhere in the world, everywhere in the industrialized world. What I may call industrial migration, right? Starting from England, industrial migration from rural sectors to the factories, to the urban settings. People migrate in seek of what? Jobs, money, and it has become a sort of a dominant pattern of human migration since then. Of course, there are different types of migration. For example, African American migration from southern cities to the northern cities like Chicago, New York, St. Louis, in the early part of 20th century in the US. This is again related to the industrial migration, but associated to the political reasons, right? Many different kind of migrations are there, but then industrial migration has been the dominant form of human migration for the last few hundred years up to now. And then it is even growing more on a global scale, not within one country, but globally. Indians, Chinese, Hispanics are coming to the U.S. In Korea, we have been witnessing an increasing number of foreigners from Southeast Asian countries and even from Africa, from China, mostly industrial migration for jobs. What I wanted to introduce in my talk is somewhat different type of migration, which I may have to term using the notion of migration. I would say if the industrial migration of the was a previous type of migration, I would say there is a new type of migration, which is not involved with your bodily, physical relocation, but a migration of activities rather than the migration of bodies. And this migration of activities are sharing many similarities to the migration of bodies, but at the same time, it shows many differences to the other one. By which I wanted to describe, because of that, the high penetration of internet and then the creation of new media environment, how people have been able to conduct their usual businesses, through this newly created media environment, not by moving their bodies, but by moving their activities. For example, just to give a common, most prominent example, the call center is located in the Philippines, or the call center is located in New Delhi. Pretend as if they are working somewhere in Texas. You receive your call 24 hours and take care of your business, but then actually they are there, in a way associated to your daily business through the cyberspace migration. So this is a bit of a different type of migration, and which is becoming as dominant as the traditional type of migration. But in any case, what I'm saying is the Korean society has been the development of media industry in Korean society perhaps can be catched by these two different notions. One, going global, and two, becoming mobile, through the cyber migration. And Korea was, as one of the slides showed, on top of the, this trend in the world. And why, would be my eventual question of this project. I'm running out of time, so but since this is the most, in a way, important part of my talk, I'll try to sum up a bit. I would say the reason why Korean society was able to come up with that much of fast development in media and telecommunications in the last couple of decades was because it was so highly associated to the restless zeal for educational attainment. Education, education, and education. You see, I'll come back to this social tie later, but the percentage of school attendance in Korean society has been changed quite impressively, education expenditures, successful education, doctoral degree holders, number of schools. And this New York Times, well, for many Westerners, especially for Americans, Korean people, may seem quite abnormal or, more than unusual. Many people are separating their family lives solely for the education of the kids, sending their kids with their moms to the English-speaking societies from the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, even South Africa, today. And the fathers remaining back home earning money, send the money to the kids. And this type of separated family lives can be prolonged, not just 1 or 2 years, but easily up to a decade, I've just met a quite close friend of mine, a few years senior to me, who has been living in that kind of situation for the last 6 years. His wife and then family, kids stayed in Missouri while he was teaching at the prestigious university in Korea, and has been visiting his Missouri home every summer and winter. And his 2 kids graduated the high schools in Missouri, and then his first son went to Washington University. Second son went to McAllister College in Minnesota this year. And then now, mommies and daddies finished their sort of sacred mission and now rejoining, This may sound quite strange, but then it has been a sort of usual thing in Korean society. Now Korean students are making up the 3rd largest college level or higher education sectors in the US, as a foreign born students, following the Indians and Chinese. But then if you are considering the sheer number of amount of population, the 11% of South Korean students are exceptionally, extraordinarily high percentage, right? Why Koreans are doing this? They were born to be like that, What would you say is that, why Koreans? Anybody can, before I speak my own sort of conjecture. Well, ever since Mark Granovetter, the sociologist, introduced the very useful and then smart notion of the strength of weak ties. People have been endeavoring in the usefulness of ties, But then whether it is weak or strong, and the ties do matter in Korean society. I thought that we really need to pay attention on the types of different ties in Korean society, which has been changed quite a bit in the last few decades. All these, what people simply call, blood ties, regional ties, and school ties are three most important ties in Korean society to make any kind of secular success. But then, in fact, in the last few decades, the types of ties have been changed in terms of its dominance, My father's generation depended more on blood ties and regional ties. But now, my generation, I don't think we are depending that much on the blood ties or regional ties. It has been almost collapsed. In a way, because of this rapid industrialization in Korean society happened in the last few decades, I found myself a generation without hometown, a generation without the home place at all. Scott, you came from Omaha, yeah? You go back to Omaha and then you still find a lot of your high school friends, your home, the streets, the trees where you buried your own old memories, If you want, you may even be able to buy back your old house. You would never do that, I know, right? In Korea, I don't have my own, old house. It was all redeveloped, not once, not twice, but, many times. I do not even recognize the roads, My friends all scattered around the country, even in New York, New Jersey, LA. My relatives, likewise, We still go back home in Korean Thanksgiving to pay tributes to their, old ancestral graveyards, But then it is also vastly weakening. Now people, because when you go back there, you don't find as many friends as my father did. So in a way, the regional ties and blood ties have been weakening and have been weakened quite a bit. And this never happened just in a day or so, It has been moved to that direction for the last few decades. And in its place, the only tie sustained, and then not only sustained, but actually taken place, the other, space that other ties claimed, which is, I think, school ties. And in terms of the rationalization and justification, school ties is actually much more rational, than any other kind of, simply because you are the family members, you can't attribute or distribute wealth or honor, But with using the school ties, because school ties are formed around the elitism, not just about any school ties, not just because you went to the same high school. No. The school ties where here we are speaking is the school ties of prestigious top schools. It is here in the U.S. society as well, Harvard alumni, Princeton alumni, any other, University of Michigan alumni, sorry, The prestige is there. But then when we are emphasizing the meaning of ties in a given society, then the ties is doing much more than just a good friendship or, just a little bit of cooperation. Because it is directly related to the production and allocation of wealth and power in the society. And obviously the social gaining in the case of school ties are rather achieved. Where it's a complicated notion. If you are thinking of the accumulation of cultural capital throughout the different generations, then in a way, even the school ties through the educational attainment can be viewed as ascribed to a certain level, ascribed capital. But then in comparison with other types of ties, it still can be depreciated as an achieved form of social capital. And possibilities and nature, privilege and accountability, it's more sort of a modern, And then that's how this lovely man, Pierre Bourdieu, introduced the notion of cultural capital. How this cultural capital has been gained and then maintained through generation and eventually forming a capitalistic class society. In fact, the French sociologist Pierre Bourdieu invented and introduced the notion of cultural capital in his own attempt to explain how a capitalist society like France have been maintaining the class, very, very stable and then strong class domination, bourgeois domination. In explaining that, in an attempt to explaining that, he thought that economic capital alone may not be a good sort of answer. So instead, he came up with this cultural capital notion. Well, there are other people, of course, in a different shoot, emphasizing the notion of social capital or human capital, American economists or sociologists from different perspectives. But then they share similar sort of notions. Right. And according to Pierre Bourdieu, the cultural capital is accumulated in three different forms. So embodied forms and objectified forms and then institutionalized forms, and then especially the form of cultural capital accumulation is achieved by the embodied form, meaning that you gain your cultural capital in your own bodily presence, in your brain, in your muscle, in your habits, in your speech. And most importantly, through your education, formal and informal education. So that if one society is emphasizing the importance of educational attainment, it will eventually create every member of society, a large number of people in that given society with quite fine level of, embodiment of cultural capital, which is exactly the thing that Korean society has achieved in the last 4 decades, at least, especially starting from 1960s. Why 60s? Because never in the entire history of Korean society for 5,000 years, the proud long history, there was the first time that, the sort of equitable public education was rendered to most of the population in the country. Well, it was created under the Japanese colonialism, during the 1910s, 20s, at the elementary school level. But the quality of education was very, very, low. When it was measured right after the national liberation in 1945, the literacy rate of Korean society was somewhere between 20 to 30%. Conservatively speaking, it's around 20%. Now it's 99, I would say almost 100%, one of the top countries in the world. It achieved that level of literacy rate in the late 1970s. So in just 1 decade, and this is a very unique case, It's no other country has achieved that kind of rapid achievement in improving the literacy rate as Korea did. And I speak that the accumulation of cultural capital, of course, translated from the economic achievement. But if you are checking the comparative data, Koreans' investment in educational attainment cannot be found in this example from any other societies so far. So that my what I'm trying to do is that explaining the development of media and popular culture industry in Korean society was actually deeply rooted in that accumulation of cultural capital in the last few decades, and then I'm still gathering some data and then trying to weave these different parts into one story. Obviously, the policy is one other factor driven by the strong state, and national politics, association with the other, media development can also be dealt as a part of the trend. But then the main focus of my narrative would be focusing on globality and mobility. Well, I overdue by like 6 minutes. Okay, this is it for my talk. Thank you very much.